Can we get an approval of the minutes from the last meeting?
I move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
And we'll start with Amy.
Yes.
Carolyn.
Yes.
Brenda.
Yes.
Adrian.
Yes.
Weston.
Yes.
Sarah.
Yep.
Matt.
Yes.
Okay, the minutes pass. The chair has nothing to report. Does the vice chair have something to report?
I have nothing.
And the director.
So I did have a list of things I wanted to update the commission on, and I can't open the document, so I'm going to try to do it from memory. But basically, it was about some of the upcoming projects, city initiatives that we have this year kind of on our plate that we've prioritized. Some of those you know a little bit about already and that you've had briefings on, things like that. So a whole new parking ordinance. We have the converting some of our zoning districts to a form-based approach, which you've had a briefing on that as well. But then we also have a couple of pretty sizable items. One, an adaptive reuse ordinance that applies not just only to historic buildings, but outside of our low-density residential neighborhoods, also to existing buildings to make it so that they can be more easily reused instead of demolished and things like that. But also in historic districts, providing some leeway on how we may be able to do things like add some dwelling units in exchange for preserving some of our historic structures and things like that. So that's coming. There's also we're working on an affordable housing overlay that would potentially increase density in some zoning districts, provided either existing dwelling units are preserved and existing structures are preserved, or they are included in new development. So there's a lot of technical analysis involved with that part, but it will essentially allow for more affordable units, to incentivize the market for providing more affordable units instead of having to rely on government subsidies for those units. So that's coming. There's also likely to be some, you may be familiar with the Life on State project. That's probably going to be going through an adoption and some zoning amendment process this year as well. Or the State Street corridor has kind of been long ignored, frankly, but from a zoning perspective. So we're also looking at that as well. So those are going to be some pretty big projects over the next 12 months that don't know that we'll be able to get all of them done. A lot of it's dependent on our private application workloads, and just so you know, we have almost, as of January 15th, we almost had as many land use applications submitted this January as we did all of last January. So kind of caught us by surprise a little bit. So the development trend we don't think is necessarily going to slow down this calendar year, but we do anticipate next year to be there to be a dip. So just to give you some highlights of the year ahead.
Hey Nick, what's the just a ballpark guess at the percentage of those applications that end up coming before us and then otherwise just go over the counter?
So we get roughly between 1,000 and 1,100 land use applications every year. The Planning Commission sees approximately 10% of those. The Landmarks Commission sees about 5% of those. Everything else is at a staff level type of thing. So they take up a lot of our time, not so much of the Planning Commission times, but we also are seeing the trend that our meeting lengths, and you guys know this, are going up, which means from our perspective that even though we may not see an increase in the number of applications that are coming to the Planning Commission, they're becoming more and more difficult and they're more and more controversial, and so that adds to length of meeting. So we're trying to get a handle on some of those things too. That's why over the past few years, you've seen some changes in processes and things like that, and some improvements to some of our zoning codes. Those things will continue, mainly because when we rely on volunteers, such as Planning Commission and Landmarks Commission, there's only so much that we can reasonably expect to get out of that. And so that's part of how we have to balance development in the city. So what are those things that are critical to go through the public process, and what can go through more of a staff level public process? Most of those applications do involve some sort of notification, either to direct neighbors or similar to what we notice for the Planning Commission. It's just the approval process is done at the staff level. So as far as city council items that are upcoming, the biggest thing that they have on their plate is everybody's favorite term, the eleemosynary changes. These basically are assisted living regulations, things like that. There's some group home things involved with that. Obviously, there's a few years ago there was quite a bit of interest at the city council of limiting the density of those types of facilities. That's been relatively problematic, especially for existing facilities, because we're essentially limiting where the beds where people who need the assistance can be. And so we're seeing a big issue with those things being able to locate in our city. So there's a proposal in front of council. There's also a fairly large open space ordinance, which some of you may remember from over a year ago, that touched almost every section of our zoning code. So basically what that does is clarify terms, open space and open space area, and the requirements in the base districts, as well as defining some of the uses and dealing with some of our things that are happening in our parks and things like that. So those are the two big things that the city council will be tackling over the next few months. They'll also be tackling the design review process updates that you saw last year. So hopefully they'll be getting that information within the next month or so, and then they'll start scheduling that. So there's a lot of big city initiatives that are on the plate this year. So just to give everyone a heads up there. And the other news that is of interest, I think, to the Planning Commission is that last night they selected Analia Valdemoros to fill the vacancy created by Derek Kitchen's resignation. And so she will fill out the remainder of that term, which is this calendar year. It's up for election in November. And for those that don't know, she's a former planner in the planning division office who left us several years ago and went and started a couple of her own businesses. And so she brings a pretty lengthy education and professional experience with land use and planning issues. So should be interesting. That's it.
Thank you. So the public is aware, there's been a change in the order of the items this evening. I think that the agenda that's over there is not exactly correct, but it's been online. So we're going to start with the early notification text amendment. Tracy?
Good evening, everybody. As you stated, I'm here to talk about the early notification text amendment. Just to give everyone a little bit of background, the petition was initiated in 2016. It was a joint effort between City Council and the administration to look at a few things. So the purpose of the petition is to clarify some existing language in the ordinance, and also one of the purposes is to increase and improve participation, while at the same time ensuring a timely review for applicants of different types of projects within the city. To give you some more history, so the Planning Commission saw this item back in May of 2017. That item was tabled for some additional information. At that meeting, Planning Commission asked for a few things for definition of an engagement activity, as well as, let me make sure I list them all. Assessing whether to include other application types, creating an overall public engagement ordinance as opposed to one just focused on the community councils and the recognized organizations, and discussing the proposal with the city's civic engagement team. So the planning staff provided a briefing back in November of 2018, and we addressed some of those items. We also provided an overview of the proposed changes. And I think we received a lot of support from Planning Commission. So the draft that you see has not changed much from the one that was before you in November. So just to kind of go over some of the big ideas, this has been completely reorganized and rewritten from the last Planning Commission public hearing in 2017. So the current rules for early notification only address recognized organizations, and it doesn't focus necessarily on budding neighbors or any other methods of informing the public. So we moved all of the requirements within the zoning ordinance to ensure that all of our zoning applications have a proper early notification process. And again, we are just focused on overall public engagement to the planning petitions. I think the previous versions, it was the chapter 2.60 affects the entire city, and based on some of the conversations that we've had with other city departments, they wanted us to just focus on the planning applications, and what we find appropriate for kind of public engagement on our side might not be the same for every other department in the city. So here are some just main ideas. We are allowing a total of 45 days for public engagement. So right now we have some language that's just unclear. It just says that we can't hold a public hearing within 45 days, but we're solidifying this process to allow at least 45 days for public engagement. So when we get an application, we will send a letter to the recognized organizations, and we'll notice all properties within 300 feet of the subject property. And also, once we get the application, we will put a sign on the property just so people are aware that something is happening. So with that, we have one engagement activity that needs to be accomplished. So if we contact the recognized organizations, they can hold a community council meeting, but if it's not scheduled or we don't hear back from them, or it's a citywide type petition, we'll hold a city-sponsored outreach event to make sure that people have proper channels to provide any comments and issues for a project. And then we just updated the open house requirement, and we renamed it an outreach event to allow for kind of a more broader definition, to allow for different methods and different means to obtain public feedback. And we did provide a definition for that outreach event. So other details, we included a purpose statement for why we are adding some of this language. We clarified the application types. We added 2 other additional application types that would have to go through this process. All the other ones are in place still, so we're not changing any existing application types. There's a list of exceptions, so for different circumstances, if there's an emergency or there's a legislative deadline for us to accomplish some of these changes, they would not have to go through that, but it's a pretty small list. And there are just some other minor clarifications and subdivision clarifications to make sure they all reference the right sections and whatnot. Here's just a quick flow chart to kind of help you understand what the process would be. And this is also located within your packet. I believe it's an attachment B. So just kind of briefly, I can run through a quick scenario. If we were to receive a plan development application, the applicant would submit the completed application. It would be assigned to a planner. We would ensure that the application was complete. Once we verified we have all the information that we need, that would kick in kind of the early notification period. So that would begin the the start of that 45-day process. So we would notify all the recognized organizations that are within the area, all properties within 300 feet, and we would post a sign on the property. So once that happens, if it's within just one community council, we would ask the community council whether or not they would like to hold an outreach, or whether they would like to schedule us for a community council meeting. And they would have 14 days to respond as to whether or not they would like the application to be in front of them. If they decide that they do not want that, or if the project is actually a citywide project, or it impacts multiple city councils, or it's in the industrial part of the city, we would just kick it to a city-sponsored outreach event. So we would notice, so again, they would just go through one of these channels. If it doesn't go through a community council, we would make sure it goes to a outreach event. So after that, we could schedule a planning commission meeting and then have it and go from there. All right, and then so just to note some of the public process involved with this, we did have a completed email, or we did send out emails to all the individuals that have been a part of this from the beginning. We reached out to all the recognized organizations, and we held an open house back in July, and I attended the Salt Lake Community Network meeting back in August. In terms of public comments, all of these are either located in your Dropbox or within the staff report. But some of the general comments, one of the comments just talked about kind of the additional time and cost concerns with the change. There are also some general concerns about signage, where to find information. And then we did have one public comment that noted that they'd want to require notice for all residential demolitions to be included in that. All those details, there's a few more comments within your packet and in the Dropbox. So we are recommending that Planning Commission transmit a positive recommendation of the proposal. And at this time, I can answer any questions you may have.
I think we're going to have you step back, and we'll do the public meeting, and then we'll do questions after that. So I'm going to open the public hearing on this item. I have a card from Judy Short.
Thank you. I think you know the Sugar House Community Council has taken advantage of the early notification project at least 100 times, probably 200, I don't know. And we find it very valuable because it helps us get more information about a project from the developer, and the developer can improve the project based on our feedback before it actually comes to you guys. So I think this is a very worthwhile project, and we appreciate it a lot. I have a couple of concerns. I think in general we're in favor of this. We just always like to tweak things a bit. I think there are some projects that may not be citywide, but they may be greater than the two community councils on either side. An example might be the City Creek project or the Trolley Square project. And so I think in the outreach events, I don't know if there's a way to add some language, but a way to ensure that sort of all affected community councils are all impacted. I don't quite know how you say that, but I think there needs to be that flexibility in the outreach events. I think some of the open houses that I've been to out and around the city have been very effective, where sometimes when I go upstairs, you know, it's me and the planner and 3 other planners at empty tables. Other times it's packed, but the ones out in the community seem to have a little more interest. And maybe part of that is because the community makes a bigger effort if they know they're going to be in the library right next to where they're having the meeting. I don't know what that is. It just seems to work better. 22nd West, Tracy explained to me, and my guess was pretty right, there's not much out there now. But I'm wondering if there's some other language that can be used instead of just saying, except for anything west of 22nd West. Because eventually there'll be something out there. Or maybe you just build in a timeline where 3 years from now you review it after they start building. And the postcard issue. I've heard people say many times, well, I never got a postcard. And I got a call from the person would say, I got a call from the guy who owns the house next door to me, and he didn't get a notice. Tracy says postcards and letters are forwarded, but I'm not sure that always works. So I worry about that. And I don't like the idea of the sign out in the middle of a muddy field, and I'm driving by 7th East, and the sign's way over there, and there's no place to park and stop, and I have to go around the block. And then it's way out in the muddy field, and I don't want to traipse out there, so I don't know what it says. So I'm wondering if there's some other way that things can be on a website somewhere that just gives the basic information but says this address. And again, think of an empty lot. If you drove by an empty lot, what would be the number of that lot? Do you know? It's really hard to find. Google Maps helps, but if they've torn down all the stuff, you can't identify the buildings to figure out which parcel it is. So it might need a little more specifics. Thanks.
Thank you. And I have a card from Cindy Cromer. Come on up.
So my name is Cindy Cromer. Former Deputy Director Sherry Coffey was working on the revisions to this ordinance at the time of her death last year. As was often the case, Sherry was dealing with a project without glamour, which was unlikely to generate gratitude from anyone. The current ordinance was written in marginal English. It was the Achilles heel when Trolley Square Ventures proposed expanding on the block south of the shopping center. Some of you were here then. There were plenty of problems with that proposal. There were 4 structures in the way. At the time, all of them were considered contributory. The proposal was to mimic Disneyland in a style which is definitely not a product of its own time. The use of the zone, which had never been contemplated outside the RDA's project area, the absence of any buffering for a low-density edge on the historic district. I could go on and on. This consumed years of my life. But the most likely way to slow the process was to ask the state ombudsman for property rights to intervene regarding the failure to follow the requirements of the notification ordinance. We did. The ombudsman agreed with us, and here we are. That's what brought us to this point. Many, but not all, of the issues from the Trolley Square proposal have now been modified or mitigated. I am fully supportive of looking at engagement more inclusively. I am very familiar with community councils and the diversity across the ones in the city, and all of the responsibility for notification for engagement cannot be delegated to them. I'm also supportive of moving the notification requirements to 21A, where people like me who are interested in land use can actually find them. I remain opposed to the 300-foot distance, which I have been for years because of the extensive land banking in the city. Very frequently, the applicant is related to the abutting property owners, and you get quite far from the proposed site before you encounter someone who's not related to the applicant. So based on my experience, I would ask you to look at the block face or 660 feet, whichever is less. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the early text amendments? Anyone out there? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Tracy, now we can ask you questions.
Your notifications, are they in English only or another language?
Currently, they are only in English, yes. But sometimes for bigger projects, we do try to have some flyers and things like that in Spanish. And we do have a few people in our office that do speak Spanish to kind of accommodate any questions that come up or the Spanish-speaking population, so.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, Tracy, I have a couple things. One is, and this probably wouldn't be written into the notification process, but when you do the notice for the postcards, currently trying to find anything on the city's website is just really hard. That you provide some direct link to where they need to go, or you have a different public-facing access to the website so that people can get that information.
Yes, well, so anything that we have that is scheduled for an open house, we have all the, we have information sheets, and we have all the associated items that are associated, and the planner who's working on that information is on the open house website. We do have a few, like a current initiatives page that we try to focus on kind of some of the bigger projects to just so people can go in that direction.
Yeah, I would just say,
Yeah, and
it's really hard. And Judy brings up a very valid point with knowing parcel numbers or addresses and how to look up stuff, and that it's nearly impossible
I think
sometimes to find what you're looking for. So I just wanted to make that note for that would be more of a internal process, not part of the notification process. And then I kind of wanted to follow up on one of the public comments because I felt like you and Lynn were kind of talking about, in a way, around each other. And I just wanted some clarification. What is the notice requirement for a standard demolition?
so. If it's just if it's allowed by right and they're not in a historic district, it doesn't require any notice.
So is that something that planning does, or is that like building permits?
So those are outside of the zoning ordinance. That's in the building
Yeah.
code chapter, and building services it administers that section of code. So oftentimes we don't even know.
That's what I
that
thought. I
something's
think
being
I wish that
demolished.
somehow that was communicated to Lynn.
Okay.
That this wasn't even in, it's not anything you can do about. She should be barking up some other tree for that one. And then I also wanted to follow up on a comment that Judy made and just inquire, what kind of signage do you put on the physical property?
So we put, I don't know what the size is, and it's not standardized, like it's certain size, but it's like this big. And we have the petition number, we have the address number, we have the planner that you can contact for that. Again, it's not perfect, but it is one method to allow people to ask questions about what's happening on that project or on that site.
So I guess maybe it isn't something to put in here as well, but is it map searchable? So if you get onto the website, are you able to see a map and see where those projects are and look at them that way in reference to Judy's comment?
Yeah, so we have a map service that does include all of our land use applications. It's a, I guess, a third-party type of service that we use that generates that. On our old website, it was posted on our homepage. We've had problems with it actually populating on the new website, so we've been trying to figure out the best way to do that. But we can certainly look at a link. One of the problems that we have is that if it's not associated with an address, it won't show up. And if it's a property that has had multiple land use applications, for some reason it's kicking them out and will only show the first one, and that first one may have been in 1974. So we're not, because it's something we're not controlling.
Yeah,
We've had some issues with it that we're trying to
Nick, one
figure
of
out
the
those
problems
bugs.
I used to run into is if a project was on 2 different parcels. One was nothing, and then I didn't know which one got associated with the project, and so that was another scenario where I couldn't find what I was looking for because it was going over more than just one parcel. And so there's a lot of, that's why I say, like, I think it's just really hard for the public to navigate all of the things that you guys are doing. Having the open house website kind of be a funnel where it's simpler and they don't have to like wade through all of this stuff that can get really tricky, I think is a necessary process internally with a broader notification so that people can access it easily, and then you don't have to keep fielding like, where is it? I can't find it.
Right, and I think one of our goals, whether this proposed ordinance gets adopted or not, is to find ways to improve, particularly what we're calling an open house, and allow that to kind of expand and change. One of the things that we're going to start doing this in better weather is having more on-site open houses. So we've tried to have the open house night where we have 3 or 4 projects that creates a whole nother types of issues. While it may be great, somebody's coming for one project, they may learn about something else. But we've had a lot of negative feedback about it. And so we're trying to find ways that we can do those things better. They don't require ordinance changes. But what this project is looking at is trying to fix some of the glaring holes in our current process. For example, there's nothing in our current ordinance that requires next door neighbors to be notified of an open house. There's just no requirement for it. Now we, by practice, do it, but we don't want to. We want to ensure that that practice stays long term, regardless of any change that may happen in the planning division or administrations or whatever. That doesn't go away without some sort of process to do it. So those are the types of things that we're trying to fix. And Tracy identified a number of the other ones as well, but we are certainly always open to those internal changes and fixes that we can do that don't require us to get city council approval and everything else. It just take time, just like this one does or has. So I don't know if I felt like I was kind of rambling, but.
So I have a question about whether the planning department has considered the obligation to have the application submitted as the trigger point as opposed to a point in time prior. Because it seems to me if you're an applicant and you spent the time to pull that together, you're already pretty far down your design path, right? And then to then go out for your public outreach, you've kind of missed a window, in my mind, on some projects to get that input early on to simplify the process. So has that ever been looked at, or is there a way where you could do the public engagement process prior to submitting your application?
Yeah, so our ordinance used to require it before application, and there was some sort of signature or proof from those community organizations that happened. And we ran into some issues with that. There were some communities that would just never sign anything, and so the applicants could never submit a complete application because it's something that they don't control. We've had some who have said that they would hold an open house, they would do it, but then it would turn out that they didn't actually tell anyone else they were holding the open house. And so at some point there has to be some sort of staff involvement in that.
But a staff could be involved early on. I mean, I guess I don't understand why, if you've got a big project and you've got a concept, why I couldn't go to a pre-application meeting with the planning department, structure a public engagement process before you actually submit anything, so you can get feedback on massing and scale and design elements before you go through the process of designing. That's my only question. It's a small one, I realize.
I was just thinking, part of that application process includes payment of a fee, and that fee goes to cover staff time. So maybe I'm out of line here, but if staff is getting involved before an application fee is paid, then we're not sure that we'll ever recapture that if the application doesn't actually get filed. I know that's kind of a silly perspective, but just
well, it's an administrative issue to think through, but I get that.
It doesn't preclude the developer from going to a meeting and getting feedback before he makes an or she makes an application, right? You can
Right,
still
and-
do
and-
that.
Still do
And
it,
I
but
was
then
just
if we've
speaking
got
as
this
to staff
45-day
involvement.
requirement post-application, if you've done that work, then can you shorten the 45-day? I guess that's my question. If you wanted to be proactive and engage earlier, can you get the benefit of not submitting your application, you've got everybody on board, waive the 45-day requirement, and get your project approved?
Oh, follow up on that. If a community organization says they're not interested or they don't respond, do you already shorten? Well, you don't now, but
We
you
don't.
could, or could you not shorten that in this new text amendment?
How we have it written, it would still be 45 days before we can make a decision on it. So we wouldn't be able to shorten that decision time.
But in that 45 days, if the community organization says no or doesn't respond, you then hold some sort of a community outreach. Okay, so maybe it still wouldn't shorten the 45 days because they still have to hold something.
Right.
I have a related question in this. So and I think I asked this when it came back, like back in May, the 45 days gets triggered when the application is complete. Does that mean the developer then, in general, is then just kind of sitting and twiddling their thumbs for 45 days waiting for this public process to happen? Or is there other things that are happening that they normally have to work through with your office or other places? So they're still engaged in doing work they would normally have to do. We've just tried to notify. So it's not like they sit down and wait for 45 days.
Correct. Usually we're working, it's a pretty iterative process, so we'll maybe bring up any issues that we see. We also route that out to all the other city departments for their comments. So when we get that back, we also, we work with the applicant to try to make any changes that are necessary. So it's more of an iterative period where we're working with the developer.
We hear from developers sometimes that Salt Lake City is challenging to work through just because of our timeline and process, and some of it probably is true, and some of it's also perceptions, and some of it's just the nature of we're a built-out city, and there's just other complications that come with it. But in your opinion, does this process, this 45 days that we're kind of pushing through here, is it going to increase the developer's kind of wait time, or chances are like this is more or less taking 45 days, we're just doing a better notification process to the public than we have in the past?
It'll probably be similar to what they already experience. Right now, our ordinance isn't clear. It just says you can't hold a public hearing within 45 days. So we still have to wait that 45 days anyways. It just clarifies that, and we just kind of solidify that you have 45 days for engagement and a decision.
And I think, Nick probably has answered this before, but you guys actually track the number of days that applications are sitting in your office and everything else. And so we could tell a year from now whether or not this process actually caused increases or decreases in the amount of time that an applicant was sitting at the planning.
Right now, with all of our applications that come to the Planning Commission, the single biggest impact on the time it takes from submittal to approval is actually waiting for applicants to update drawings. And so usually that happens, those are all identified within the first probably 3 to 4 weeks of this 45-day period. And then there's a checklist of comments that get sent out, and the majority of applications have to make some kind of change just to meet even basic requirements. And that's the holdup usually. That's why you may see something on an agenda and then it gets pulled because they couldn't quite get their drawings updated. Right now, for most of the big things that come to the Planning Commission, the approval process is, I think the average is probably in right around 80 days from time of application to date of approval. And that's the nature of our process. We're far different to build something in an urban infill situation versus a greenfield that a lot of the communities in Utah are dealing with. And so when we're dealing with the same types of developers, sure, it might be easier to build in Lehigh, but they have a 9-acre site with plenty of laydown yard and everywhere to put their property, whereas if you're building on a 20,000 square foot site in the middle of downtown, where do you stage all your construction equipment? You got to find a place, right? And that is in and of itself is challenging. So it's just a different animal. Our processing times have decreased. I can't remember the exact date, or the exact number of days, but back in, I think it was 2010, the items that were going to planning commission were around 120 days. So we've decreased that pretty significantly, 40%.
And just, I mean, in your opinion, and this process is not going to increase the time that applicants take. It's just better improving our outreach during that period, better using our time better.
The applications that are the most impacted by the 45 days are the conditional uses that don't really require any new construction. Bars downtown have to sit and wait 45 days, even though we never get any comments on them. So that the answer to that isn't to try to fix it through this; it's to make them permitted. But that's a different.
And that 45, and that's by state, as long as it's conditional, right? That 45-day.
No, that's a local ordinance. In fact, state law includes a provision that a land use applicant can, once their application is complete, they can request a decision within 45 days. And this 45 days makes it so the city could not comply with state law. We haven't had that happen yet, at least to my knowledge. But part of this would allow us to comply with state law if we need to. So.
Thanks.
Any more discussion?
I'm also curious about something that Judy brought up about the large projects that might impact more than just like the neighboring community councils. Is there, I don't know how you would measure that and figure out what project is something that needs to go more broadly. Is there a way for community councils to be on some sort of notification list for everything, so that they get everything, even if it would be a lot, but they would at least get everything that goes to the public?
We do have a current listserv, so everybody on a community council is provided that. So all the open houses and all the public meetings are, all those are, those are all disseminated. So usually any sort of big citywide project, anything that goes to an open house, everybody gets notice of those. Is that accurate?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then maybe addressing Cindy's concerns about the 300 versus the block face or the 660 feet. Is the 300 feet just the historical standard, or is that?
I think so. I think Nick can speak to that a little better, maybe.
Yeah, that was it. If I remember correctly, it actually used to be 400 feet. It was probably 10 years or so ago, and I don't remember the details of why it changed. The applicants pay that noticing fee. So the only impact to city cost would be on city projects.
And do you feel like, in your experience, that that's to the point it's not reaching the people who are feeling like they are being impacted? Do you think that, is there a disconnect there, or is it not really?
I think it's really dependent on different projects.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, people tend to care about the more controversial projects.
Sure.
I mean, we notice people who are doing conditional use the same as a planned development. So it's just really.
Is there a way to give staff some flexibility in making that decision and thinking maybe we need to make this larger? Is that a bad idea? I'm kidding.
Yeah, that would be really challenging for us to make sure that we're being equitable in how we do that. I don't know that the distance matters all that much. I know, and I will try to track this down, I know that Sherry did a survey and kept stats of the number of notices we send out at the 300 and the number of touch points that people contacted us and participated in the process based on those notice. And I want to say it was down in the 1% and 2%. If you increase that, there might be more people. That's something to think about. But I think that there is some reality that direct notice is not the most effective way of engaging people.
And regardless, there is a sign on site so that if that individual interacts with that space on a regular basis, they're going to have some sort of recognition that there's something going on, and then can go to the website and look it up and figure it out.
Correct.
Okay.
And the planner's name's on all of the applications, so that is usually a pretty good way to get all the information that you need when you call them.
So the sign that we put up on the lot or the property, does it include a website to go to?
It does not.
Well, it
Because most people,
should.
if they're curious, they don't want to pick up the phone. Nobody wants to pick up the phone anymore. So they just rather, type it in and say www.
Yeah,
Here it is.
The sign we post is easy for us to modify and create. There should be some that information available. I know that we've tried other different types of things where we have posted signs that include like a site plan on it and things like that, and we didn't seem to make any kind of impact. We think that the biggest impact that we're going to make is by having those more on-site, where we can sit out there for an hour and a half or whatever at a convenient time for that neighborhood and for those neighbors to walk across the street and ask us about a project and talk to us, and then we can get the information that way.
Madam Chair, I'm ready to make a motion.
Please do.
Based on the findings and analysis in the staff report, testimony, and discussion at the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council approve PLN PCM 2016-00600 early notification text amendments.
In a second.
I'll second it.
Weston seconds. We'll start with Matt.
Yes.
Sarah.
Yes.
Weston.
Yes.
Adrian.
Yes.
Brenda.
Yes.
Erlen.
Agree.
Amy.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the Foothill Trails Master Plan. Get Lewis.
Good evening, Commission members. I think everyone here probably remembers me, but I'm Lewis Kogan. I am the Director of Salt Lake City's Trails and Natural Lands Division. I don't have a PowerPoint for you today, but if it seems appropriate, I thought I would give about a 6 or 7 minute recap or summary of the key points from the Salt Lake City Foothill Trail System Plan, and then allow you to turn it over to for public comment if that seems appropriate. Excellent, thank you. So the Salt Lake City Foothills Trail System Plan was created in large part to address many of the issues currently facing the lands and trails in our foothills open spaces. And the development and implementation of this plan, we believe, is fully consistent with the specific policy guidance and recommendations of the 1992 Salt Lake City Open Space Master Plan. The vision of the plan is the Foothills Natural Area will provide a variety of recreational trail experiences for all ages and abilities while managing the foothills environmental resources for future generations. There are 5 stated planning goals for the trail system. Those are to create trails that are environmentally sustainable, enjoyable, accessible, safe, and low maintenance. The plan area includes about 6,000 acres of canyons and foothills bordering the northern and eastern limits of Salt Lake City, with the north plan boundary being Salt Lake City's north boundary and extending southward to Emigration Canyon. We anticipate that the foothill open spaces between Emigration and Parley's Canyon would be addressed in the future with a plan update. Salt Lake City is the largest landowner within the plan area. The plan area includes lands managed by Salt Lake City Public Utilities and also by Salt Lake City Trails and Natural Lands. The plan area also includes lands that are owned and managed by the U.S. Forest Service, the University of Utah. This is the Place Heritage Park and private inholdings. And there are also conservation easements held by Utah Open Lands. Our public outreach during the plan process included a year-long trail user survey extending from June 2016 to June 2017. We conducted stakeholder interviews, user intercept surveys, a statistically valid randomized survey of citywide residents, and a week-long workshop with representatives from 37 different stakeholder groups. We also received feedback via direct email, an online mapping and survey platform, additional stakeholder interviews, presentations to various boards and councils, and 2 open houses. In all, we received over 5,000 public comments on our trail system plan to date. We do intend to seek City Council's formal adoption of the Foothills Trail System Plan eventually, and we're working towards that. The plan recommendations are for a proposed trail network in the Foothills Natural Area that combines the rehabilitation of existing unsustainable routes with recommendations for new sustainable trails. And when fully constructed, this proposed trail system would include 65 miles of new trails and 41 miles of existing trails for a total system length of 106 trail miles. The most unsustainable existing social trails would be decommissioned to mitigate erosion. We anticipate the trail system including a mix of multi-directional shared use trails, uphill mountain bike, multi-directional hiking trails, mountain bike only trails, and hiking only trails. The network would also include improved trailheads located on significant transportation corridors all across the interface between the plan area and residential neighborhoods. And the system would also include user-friendly wayfinding signage located at every trail intersection and attractive informational kiosks located at trailheads. Finally, the plan also includes 3 habitat study areas where biological impact assessments will be conducted prior to new trail construction in order to inform trail alignments and mitigate disruption of native species. Our anticipated cost to construct the full trail system is $2.8 million, and that does not include trailhead improvement costs because those have not yet been estimated. We plan to do that at a future date. The trail system maintenance and management costs are estimated at about $420,000 annually. Due to budget limitations, agency requirements, and putting together the necessary multi-jurisdictional agreements, implementation of this plan is going to need to be phased over a period of, we are anticipating about 6 to 10 years. Currently, we have the plan implementation broken into 3 phases. Phase 1 would be the first 3 years, and we are anticipating that we would build about 14 miles of trail in that phase at a cost of about $620,000. Phase 2, we anticipate would occur between years 4 and 6 post-adoption. That phase includes about 37 trail miles and could be constructed at an estimated cost of about $1.64 million. And the final phase would happen between years 7 and 10 and includes over 13 miles of trail for an estimated cost of about $580,000. We conducted a detailed review of the Foothill Trail System Plan draft in the fall of 2018. Staff from Parks and Public Lands, Salt Lake City Public Utilities, Watershed Division, the Transportation Division, and the Planning Division all participated in that review, which concluded in early December of this past year. Our staff are still in the process of making some changes, but the version, the current draft that is available online and that was shared with you a couple of weeks ago does include the most substantive updates. A couple of final changes and edits that we are still in the process of making include additions to the narrative text to add details or clarification, revisions to tables, diagrams, and page layouts to improve the clarity of the information presented, additional appendices, especially around best practices documentation, and finally, addition of a soils and geologic analysis section. Our own Parks, Natural Lands, Urban Forestry, and Trails Board is scheduled to take some formal action on the plan tomorrow night, and the Salt Lake City Bicycle Advisory Committee would also like to do the same at their next formal meeting. So I would like to request that you continue this hearing and wait to get formal feedback from those two boards or commissions before making a final decision.
We can do that.
Great, thank you.
So we'll leave the public hearing open, right?
Yeah, that's at your prerogative, but it seems to make sense to do that.
Okay. Okay. So we will do that. You're welcome. Did anybody here have any questions for Louis right now? Well, we'll open it and we'll find out.
Yeah, so there'd be after everybody who's here gets a chance to speak, if there's nothing new that any commissioners want to add, then if you choose to continue the public hearing to a later date, you would just do that through a motion. So
we would just make a motion to continue the hearing. Okay. Okay, so step back and we'll see what the public has.
Thank you.
I will open the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on the Foothill Trails Master Plan? Please come forward. You need to come forward, make sure you speak into the microphone, state your name, and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Yvette Rain. I'm here on behalf of the Wasatch Mountain Club to voice our support for this project. The project is very much aligned with what we're about, which is non-motorized, basically recreation in the Wasatch Mountains, as well as education for the public, access for the public, et cetera. So we're very well aligned and in support. And we're also aligned with many of the other organizations that this will impact, such as the National Forest Service, Bonneville Shoreline Trail. Our organization does a lot of trail maintenance, so we are excited to support this in the future as well.
Thank you. Ma'am, come on up. And be sure to state your name for the record.
My name is Diane Nielsen. I'm a resident of the Avenues and an active user of the trail system. I'm also a licensed professional geologist in Utah. And I've provided you with a written copy of my comments, so I'm not going to read those tonight. But I did just want to summarize a couple of issues briefly for consideration as the plan is reviewed and finalized. First of all, I think it's really important that the maps themselves have an indication that these trails are for non-motorized vehicles, that motorized transport is prohibited. It's mentioned within the plan, and that's certainly appropriate, but these maps are the things that people are going to carry around in their pocket. And that designation isn't mentioned on the maps. I say this because I've been on trails when we've had motorcycles. Back in the 90s, we used to see a lot of four-wheel drive vehicles try and make it up on some of those trails. It's always a challenge, it's always an intrigue, and I think it's really important that we be really clear to people before they arrive at the trail site that there are limitations in terms of their access. I'd also like to emphasize the importance of how we deal with existing trails. There's some inconsistencies in the maps that I think will probably be worked out as the final report is prepared. I've pointed out a couple of those, and I'd be happy to talk with staff at the Division of Parks and Public Lands. But my overall concern is that we not look at trails that are existing but maybe haven't qualified for either being incorporated in the map or being actively or passively decommissioned. And those trails somehow take on a off-limits designation to them. There are a number of trails that provide loops for neighbors who hike in the foothills, and I think it's really important that if we're going to discontinue the use of a trail, that there be a formal process with some public notice and comment as part of that action. I strongly support the plan. I think this access to trails adjacent to Salt Lake City and the Wasatch Front is really valuable for us, but I think it's important that we also respect the users as well as the importance of stewardship of the trails. Finally, just a comment about one particular trail, which is the Sugarloaf Trail, one that I'm very familiar with, and right now it's a shared access, but it's really inappropriate for that use, and I'm hoping that there'll be some reconsideration of that. It's got a steep access, which is already eroding. It's a very short trail, almost a block, maybe a little bit less than that, and is only getting foot access now. And I'm hoping, because of its near location to a number of homes and the nature of the trail, that the categorization could change. I really appreciate the opportunity to present these comments to you and look forward to supporting the work as the Trail Master Plan goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to speak on this? Speak into the microphone, tell us your name, and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Kathleen Stoddard. I've been on the Bonneville Shoreline Trail Committee for well over 20 years. I think I was started on the construction committee when the Shoreline Trail started building the Bonneville Shoreline Trail at the Terrace Hills in Salt Lake City, and very much appreciate this new the master plan, and hope to continue helping to build trails in Salt Lake City. The Bonneville Shoreline Trail has thousands of hours of volunteer hours, and we can hope to do more and guarantee help to build the trails. Thank you for your work on this.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Commission members, thank you. My name is Kevin Dwyer. I'm with the Salt Lake Valley Trail Society. We are your local mountain bike trails nonprofit. We maintain, build, and advise municipalities and other land managers on mountain bike trails throughout Salt Lake County. In 2019, we're planning to partner with Salt Lake City to do 24 trail maintenance and construction days. And that's because we recognize that there is an incredible need for trail resource. The number one recreational amenity identified by Salt Lake County residents in a 2015 and 2010 Salt Lake County survey. And this need has developed because it's such a great opportunity to build community and quality of life for our citizens. Unfortunately, most trails have developed sort of organically. It's sort of the nature of things. They're natural surfaces, and we are natural creatures. However, we've come to learn that, as population grows and user base grows, that we need to have a little bit more programmatic approach to it, and that we can build things more sustainably, and that we can get more people out on the trails. And I'd like to applaud Salt Lake City, and indeed everybody in this room. I mean, I see a lot of people as I look around that have been involved in this process for a year and a half. And it's very exciting to see that they're still here, and they're still supportive of a comprehensive process that looked at not only the trails themselves, but the infrastructure and transit necessary to facilitate the use of those trails. So I really appreciate this effort. I think it's been an excellent point for which to implement a comprehensive plan, and I would encourage you all support for the passage of the Trails Plan, both here and at the council level. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, doesn't seem to be anyone else here this evening. Would we like to continue this?
Move to continue.
Thank you, Brenda.
Table and continue public hearing.
I second.
Okay, we have Brenda made the motion to table and continue the public hearing. Adrian second. Amy?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Agree.
Brenda?
Yes.
Adrian?
Yes.
Weston?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Okay, we will table this motion and continue the public hearing at a future meeting. Thank you.
Thank all of you for coming. Wow, why didn't they say something?
That was a courtesy to them.
I know. We'll play.
Back up.
Madam Chair, I'd like to disclose a conflict and recuse myself for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
He's
So just keep moving outside and take your conversations to the hall, please. And our next item up is the Spy Hop Plan Development. Eric, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Nice to be with you here this evening. What we're looking at here, this item is for a plan development for Spy Hop, and which is a digital media student center with community event space. It's at 208 West, 900 South, and again, it's a plan development, and that is specifically because it's seeking relief for the third level step back requirements, which we'll talk about, and ground level glass requirements. So the property is located in the FBUN2 zone, and is part of the downtown master plan, and is specifically part of the Central 9th neighborhood. And just kind of looking at the surrounding area there, the lot is currently vacant, but it's adjacent to a number of different types of development. There's several 3-story multi-tenant buildings, apartment buildings. One to the north and a brand new one across the street to the east. And there's several other commercial buildings adjacent to it as well at the intersection there. And then of course it is, immediately adjacent to the tracks stop there on 200 West. So as we kind of look at the site plan here, the property is approximately 0.4 acres, and the building is proposed at about 20,000 square feet. I know the applicants are here and they're anxious to talk about the project. I'll let them give a little bit more detail on the project itself, but approximately have 150 to 200 students, and is proposed as 47 feet tall. Just kind of looking at the site to give you orientation. So here's 200 West and 9th South, and the parking for the building would come off of the alley to the west and circulate in one direction and then exit onto 200 West there. And the building is built kind of right up to the setbacks on both street sides. So this is kind of taking a look at it, and again, I know the architect will talk about it a little bit more, but the building was kind of built to have a presence and help define that intersection, but help be built at both a neighborhood and a pedestrian scale with different features. The architecture is a modern style, but it includes architectural grade concrete at the ground level, and then plenty of glass. And then this surface here on the second level is a perforated metal, which will have a transparency through it, through those perforations. And this is kind of looking from the other angles. This is along 200 West. Again, you know, many features to be able to kind of help relate the building to the sidewalk and that, which we'll take a look at. And then this is from the rear, kind of taken from that alley, kind of looking at the back side where the parking is. And the traffic will actually pass underneath to 200 West. So as we take a look at this and as you consider this evening, again, this is going through a plan development process because it doesn't meet all of the standards of the FBUN2 zone exactly. And so the plan development gives opportunities that if it meets criteria that you can approve some modifications to those requirements. And so in this particular instance, two of the requirements that it considers is that it's built according to principles of sustainability, and we'll look at those, and then that it helps implement the master plan. Specifically with the sustainability, we look at the energy use and generation of the building itself, and you know, what technologies are implemented to help, you know, with pollution generated from the site itself, or, you know, its location to be able to take advantage of mass transit, things like that. And then the reuse of a priority site, saying, okay, we're largely a built-out community. Are there locations that could be better utilized than they are currently, and that could bring something better to the table? And then with the master plan implementation, there's a lot of goals and objectives, both in the Plan Salt Lake document and in the downtown master plan. And so we take a look at, you know, how it implements those, and, you know, if it's found to implement those principles, then of course it can be given approval to move forward. So the first item for which they're seeking relief has to do with this third-story step back. In the FBUN2 zone, it says that any level over the second level needs to step back a minimum of 15 feet. And the idea behind that is that it creates, one, some vertical, you know, some relief, helps it relate a little bit more to the pedestrian scale, so when you're walking by, you're not looking up and it's feeling so massive that it's on top of you. Step backs creates a little, gives it a little bit more of a pedestrian feel to it. And but that still allows them to gain some height. Now, in the past, that's also been interpreted to exclude things such as stairwells or elevator shafts that can't be avoided. In this particular case, the building, there are two areas which would not meet these requirements. And so the first is right here, and this is along 9th South. That portion of the building is set back 8 feet rather than the 15. And so kind of the circled area, you know, according to the standards, would need to either go back an additional 7 feet or seek relief. And what the challenge is here is this, of course, you can see that there's a large rooftop patio and garden area, and this also serves as a community event space. So right in this area, there will be like an overhead door, like a garage-style door that'll open up, and it'll allow for that to be a flexible space for, you know, people, events and whatnot. This particular area includes media controls, sound and lighting controls, and moving it would mean, one, obviously that the indoor portion of the space would be smaller, but it would necessitate moving those controls and would just create, and you know, in their proximity to the way the doorways go into the stairwell over here, just all that would need to be reconfigured, and it would really disrupt the overall use of that to be able to kind of flow in and out between the two, the indoor and the outdoor space. Along 200 West, this portion here is an equipment room. And so it's got, the building, as you'll see, has got solar panels on the roof here. And so a lot of the mechanical equipment related to those is located in this room. It needs to be on that third story. And the way, just kind of looking above the way the parking is, this would either have to cut into that community space or it can be located here. This works well because it's again adjacent to like the fire riser room and the emergency exiting on this north side. So, this portion does not step back at all, but relocating it would create a hardship in that the site would need to be reconfigured. They would need to, build another portion of the building or lose some parking, or just it would not be easy to accommodate with what's happening here. In considering this, we look at, okay, well, so what's being done to help, what are we getting in return? And of course, in this case, we're getting a very large, open, third-story patio, and that's something that's, goes above and beyond what would normally be required at the 15 feet. So this becomes a large community gathering space, which is identified in the master plan as saying, that's something that they'd like to see is a place where the community can gather and whatnot. So let's see, the next one deals with the ground floor glass requirements. So currently the ordinance reads as needing 60% glass, and that's defined as a zone from 2 feet to 8 feet, that's where you count it. And so that's kind of depicted in the red here as to what that area is. And they come short of that glass requirement, but kind of in lieu of that, well, and there's several reasons for that we'll talk about, but in lieu of that, what they're proposing is that the glass would be taller on that first floor. So across this space here, it'd be up to 10 feet, and closer to the corner here, it'd be up to 14 feet. And so although that doesn't necessarily change the percentages, because obviously, they would also in that same zone have additional, the concrete material, but it would create, that much more glass and opening and light that would transmit out to the public space. The challenges with these areas relates to what's on the inside, and so this is a recording studio, and they've got challenges with, with tracks coming by and other traffic and things like that. They've got to be able to use that concrete for sound deadening to help make that space actually functionable. Without it, it could cause some problems. This area, you also see it does slant in, kind of inviting people into that space, and they've proposed, concrete seating out there. So they've really tried to do other things to help activate the space and make it feel inviting at a pedestrian scale. And then, even the second floor with that perforated metal and allowing the light to come out, it should still be a very inviting area. And then just the fact that kind of the programming behind the glass is a recording studio, or they've got their sound stage. They've got different components that will actually be interesting to be next to, rather than just dead space that looks in on a hallway or something or other. So, and this is similar, pretty much the same situation on the second west side of the glass and the heights and that kind of area. A couple other considerations that are mentioned in your staff report, just things that would need to be taken care of. As you enter in the parking from the alley to the west, there's some parking stalls located here, and the way these are laid out at this angle would require, when people are backing out, to do part of their maneuvers in the alley, and that is prohibited by the ordinance. And so we're asking that they shift the parking a little bit further to the east, so all parking maneuvers, backing maneuvers, and that can happen on site. This area is currently a little courtyard. There's some bike parking, there's things like that, but it's not required landscaping. It's not a required courtyard. Those elements could be spread out or shifted a little bit differently, or just configured without affecting the overall site, and still allowing the parking to function properly. The second relates, so if you remember the renderings, as it exits onto 200 West, the parking actually goes underneath a portion of the building. It passes underneath, and it's one-way traffic out onto 200 West. And the ordinance talks about that the drive aisle, as it meets the public street, be no wider than 12 feet. And they had a proposed, I believe is 15. And so we're recommending that that be narrowed, be narrowed through increased landscaping, striping, or material changes. And that also would create a little safer situation here as these doors exit. One's for the fire riser, one's for an exiting stairwell, that they would have a little buffer so that a vehicle couldn't be coming here and you swing open the door and hit that. But those are two things that would need to be taken care of as well. In considering this, again, we kind of look at, well, how's it fulfilling the goals of Plan Salt Lake and the Downtown Master Plan. This is definitely underutilized land in an area that's starting to emerge with more and more development. It's kind of an up-and-coming area in that Central 9th area. And I feel that this is a use that helps fulfill a lot of the goals. It, of course, is located next to the public transit. There's very few parking stalls. They anticipate that most of the students will use public transportation to get there. If parents are involved or whatever, they would maybe drop off their students and their kids, and most faculty in that could use mass transit. There are a lot of efficient technologies built into this building. It's got active and passive solar. So the passive solar includes like sun shields, so that in the summer the windows are shaded. In the winter, it's collecting light to help heat the building. The trees on the rooftop help shade the building. The windows are set to open so they can use cool air to come in. I mean, it really uses a lot of green technology. The master plan also, in a number of cases, asks for finding opportunities for additional schools downtown, ways to develop tech talent downtown, and this fulfills both of those. The building itself we feel is built at a pedestrian scale. It's got nice features with the architecture and the glass and the seating to really help relate it at a pedestrian scale to surrounding development and kind of create a focal point at that intersection there. And really, with a community gathering space on the roof, feel that becomes kind of a neighborhood centerpiece, which is called out in the master plans as well. Overall, we feel that this proposal meets the recommendations for the plan development and recommend approval with those two modifications to the parking that I discussed. So,
thank you. Any questions for Eric? Okay, we'll have you step back and have the applicant come up.
Thank you. Thanks, Eric.
Yep. Be sure to say your name for the record, and you get 10 minutes.
I'm Peter Corroon. I'm helping SpyHop with the development. Cassandra Herb-Rugen is the executive director of SpyHop, and Jason Foster with Atlas Architects is the architect for the project. So we thought it might be good, in case some of you didn't have some background on SpyHop, just to have Cassandra give you a quick overview.
Great, yeah, thank you so much for allowing us to be here tonight. SpyHop is a youth media arts and education center, and we were founded in 1999, and our mission is to mentor young people in the digital media arts to really help them find their voice, tell their stories, and be empowered to affect the change that they want to see in their lives. we serve 15,000 young people statewide. Our base is here in Salt Lake City, providing both in-school, out-of-school, and then community-based programming in film, audio, music, and design. And we use a sort of scaffolded approach, and so it's accessible to any young person who wants to get started or has a greater passion and wants to fulfill that passion, and through vocational and what we can term a digital pathways program. So you want to do the next one there? Really kind of the way we sort of describe who we are is we work at the intersection of arts education, youth development, and workforce development. Again, giving young people, our ultimate goal is to give young people the skills and dispositions that they need to succeed in life and to provide an opportunity for them to contribute to the civic discourse in their communities.
That's a little bit about SpyHop, and then Jason, you want me just to give a little overview? I'd hate to describe your artwork.
No, I'm happy to let you give it a shot.
So the site, I don't know if this was mentioned, but it is a brownfield site, and so it's been remediated actually a few times now, and unfortunately not successfully the first 2 times, but we're pretty confident the third time's the charm. So it has been remediated, and in its place and it was a former gas station and I think an auto repair shop as well at one point. It's now vacant, obviously, but in its place will be a new 2.5-story building, as was mentioned, 24,000 square feet, which will be essentially a youth media center for SpyHop, and also its Phase 2 Productions, which is a
kind of a graduate program.
Yeah, video production company that's alumni run.
As was mentioned, we'll have rooftop event space. We'll serve about 300 students a week with various classes. And it's a great location for SpyHop because it's sort of in the middle. It's a safe zone for kids who come from the east and kids who come from the west. I think all students feel comfortable coming to this location. It's right at a track stop, so those students who don't drive can take the light rails to get there. And then it is being designed to a LEED Silver standard, and will have solar power on it as well. And as was mentioned, there was a few issues with the design. Actually, I think some of the zoning had been changed, so at least on the step back issue, that the initial design actually fit within the zoning when it was designed, but then the ordinance changed, is my understanding, and so we didn't fit within the zoning anymore. So as Eric showed, this drawing where the 2 issues on the step back took place, and I would just show you the bird's eye view of that. So you can see on the lower left is that staircase, and then just to the right is where the event space, the indoor event space, will be. So if we had to push that door on the lower left back, it would cut into the event space and change the configuration. And then on the upper right is the mechanical room. One of the issues, if we had to move the mechanical room, it then would cause us to not have an emergency exit in our staircase. So that's another reason that we need to keep that mechanical room where it is rather than move it back in from the street.
It's also placed as part of the stack of functions that are going on programmatically below it. So it's not arbitrarily placed there, but it's sort of the crown over some functions that are happening in the building on the lower levels.
And the other issue was the glazing requirement. As Eric mentioned, there's that 2 to 8 foot zone where we don't meet the requirements, but if you extended that zone, we're actually 49% higher in glazing on 200 West, and then on 900 South would be 63% higher on the glazing. So we actually have more glass than would otherwise be required if it weren't just in that 2 to 8 foot zone. There's just another picture of that again. So those are really the issues and a little bit about SPI-HOP. So we're happy to answer any questions you have.
Anybody have questions?
What are the age range of the students that you're serving?
So we serve ages 9 to 20. And during this, at the center, during the school year is teenagers. And in the summertime is both teens and younger youth. And then statewide we work in the schools K-12. And that's, you know, all ages, really starting at elementary school, not kindergarten.
And also, do they get a certificate or?
A lot of depends on the program. A lot of they don't get a they leave with a portfolio that enables them to get into college, get a job. That is a vetted portfolio through, you know, industry professionals come and sort of sign off, if you will. Some of the students get some of our programs. The students actually do get a school credit if it's like an internship that they're doing. It just varies from school to school. Some of our in-school programming that we do is in place of, say, an art class that they may be taking, and so they're getting credit that way.
And then also, are you serving students through all the school districts?
Yeah, so we're part of a statewide group of arts organizations that tour the state, and it's a partially legislatively funded program that's administered by the Board of Education, and we're required every 3 years to offer our programs to every school in the state.
Thank you.
So I'm wondering, how many staff do you have that would be utilizing that parking?
So we currently have 20 full-time and 2 part-time staff, and in the new building we're anticipating, my sort of projections go out over a 5-year period. We'll be at 25 full-time and 3 part-time.
So the parking is, not that.
No.
It's a lot less.
Yeah. Well, we actually have staff that live within walking distance from the building, which is great. But yeah, and then we have staff that actually take the tracks right now to where we're located. And the other thing is we work, the program runs from, we're open from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. every day. And so we have staff coming and going. So some of our staff are actually coming in at 11 and leaving at 8. Some are coming in at 8, leaving at 5. Some are actually traveling statewide, so they're not, necessarily in the building. So we're not all in the building at the same time needing a place to park. But that's also a value of ours too, is ensuring that we keep and maintain a healthy staff, and we support that culture. And our hope is that our staff will be taking tracks, especially since all 3 lines stop right there.
Well, I have to say, I was so happy to see this parking lot go. I've always thought, I can't believe this is still here. But so I'm thrilled with the location. I'm glad you're doing something there.
Are there any concerns with what staff recommends with the moving the parking to the east and the?
At this point, we're looking at primarily, there's the one stall that's primarily at issue here. We'll probably actually just convert to additional bicycle parking or bicycle racks because, again, of this emphasis on alternative modes of transportation and the fact that it is a very youth-driven user group. I don't think we're going to find a regret in doing that. And as long as that works functionally for them, it's easier for us to just convert that stall rather than encroach further into that courtyard, because that courtyard is also part of the backside of that. Isn't just parking lot. We've designed it in a way that it's a specific drop-off area that can be somewhat more secure as a means for a parent drop-off, especially for those where when we're dealing with younger kids. That courtyard also has an additional function which you're not necessarily seeing in the plans that were shown, but there is a gathering kind of lounge space right adjacent to that where doors can open up into that courtyard. So it's really meant to be sort of a very flexible and user-friendly space for SpyHop. And so rather than lose that real estate, which would be, you know, I think valuable to them, we're willing to just basically drop a stall. We need the bike function anyway, or we've accommodated it to meet the requirements of zoning, but we're certainly not opposed to adding additional stalls or bike capacity.
And then the reduction of the drive aisle, that's
the necking down is actually no, for us that's not a problem. I mean, the reason it was shown as the traffic also traffic actually requires that for that drive lane to actually be 15 feet, which is what we just had as a constant moving underneath that. Necking that portion down to a 12-foot is not a problem. It's a one-way lane anyway. We actually had what's called a speed table where that actually bumps up, so it's actually at the same height as a sidewalk. That stair is really intended as more of a convenience stair, but it's certainly emergency egress. But the heavier traffic will probably be coming in from other parts of the building anyway. So we don't see it as a heavy use stair, but to make the adjustment, we've actually already made the adjustments that have been recommended. We're hoping to, if this gets the approval, then we'd like to submit it actually this week, so for permit. So that's our hope.
Thanks.
So I just want to say I was on the redevelopment advisory committee subcommittee that reviewed your initial proposal for the site across the street, and we came up with this idea that we liked that project too, but we really liked yours, and it should go on this site. So I just wanted to say I'm thrilled it actually worked out, and congratulations.
Well, so are we. It's definitely it's a great fit programmatically, and I will say as also a business owner and property owner in the neighborhood that this is something we are very excited about. So
yeah, no, it's wonderful.
Forward to breaking ground.
Okay, any more discussion? Anybody ready to make a motion?
You need to open public hearing.
Public hearing. I guess because there were so many people from the public here. If you guys will step back, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone from the community council here? Is there anyone here who would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Bring that back to the commission. Any discussion?
So, Nick, do you have any concern with converting that one parking spot to bike parking as opposed to shifting and encroaching on the courtyard the way it's recommended?
This zone doesn't have any minimum parking requirements, so what they want, you know, whatever they feel is going to work best for them.
Want to bring them back up?
Oh, do you want to come back up? Do you have some questions?
I do have a couple of
okay.
questions.
So would you come back up?
You know you weren't good. I have a question on the site plan, the loading area. Doesn't seem to be consistent, or I can't figure out. Oh, I see. It's a future shop pad. So does the loading dock have a wall on the
North. Oh, well, let me, if I may, I can probably explain. May I go up to
a little bit?
We need you to be at the microphone.
Microphone? Well, I can.
We have this. We have this stuff. Yeah.
So What you can't see in the floor plan behind it is there's actually a sound stage. So there's a large roll-up door there where the sets and material are brought in and out on a regular basis. What we have also accounted for is that they would like to, at some point, eventually expand their set design and constructability or construction capabilities on site. So when we talk about future shop, that's what that's referring to as well. So they have I would say, a pretty steady stream of use for an area where they can just load and offload kind of bulky stuff. The other thing as well, the stair tower that is on the 9th South side is it's called the Periscope, but that's also the public entrance for public events. So that could be anything from a wedding to a concert potentially, or some other event. If caterers, we have a catering kitchen on the 3rd level. So if a caterer pulls up, needs to offload food, carts, anything of that nature, they basically come in from that loading area without having to park out on the street or use the parking stalls that are actually allocated for staff. So that's the intent of that loading area. Did that answer the question?
I guess the question, I'm looking at the level 1 floor plan. And so there's, can we look at the level 1 floor plan and not the site plan for a second?
Yeah, I don't think it was on here, sorry.
Okay, it seems to be a solid wall beginning at, well, how can you have a loading area? Oh, you have a loading area coming in from the side, from the alleyway.
From the alley, yeah, correct.
Okay. Okay. And then you have a covered area next to that loading area.
It's actually, the loading area is covered. The level 2 and level 3 floors actually come out over, they extend out over to the alley. Yeah, you can
that's
see,
the one. That's the one I was looking at, going, where is that? Because I couldn't figure out what's going on there.
Yeah, so you can see kind of a white door there. That's the roll-up door that goes directly into the soundstage area.
But so you do have an opening there.
Yes.
So you have an opening from the parking lot, but the cars park in front of it.
No.
You can access it from the alley.
They have totally, everything's accessed from the alley. So the drive lane comes in from the alley.
Yeah.
The loading comes in from the alley.
So why do you even have an opening there?
I'm not, why do I have an opening to the loading area?
No, to the parking lot.
From the loading area.
Why, well.
It suggests that you're going to drive through there the way you're going to drive through on the other side.
No, because we have our dumpsters in that zone. So the dumpster is actually located, it's not rendered there, but that zone actually has the enclosure for the dumpster. And I will say, I mean, that's, usually dumpsters are not.
What you render.
What you like to render. But there is a walled dumpster enclosure. So, because we have to screen our dumpsters.
Right. Okay. I'm clearly not communicating what I'm asking about. Okay. Not important.
I think I get what you're asking.
Yeah, I'm asking why there's an opening.
But there's no open. It doesn't open all the way.
Pad or loading area.
But it doesn't. It doesn't open all the way to the street.
No, I know that.
Okay.
I know that now. But I'm just asking why there's an opening there at all.
As opposed to just a wall, so you don't have to see it.
Well, it's just added expense. I mean, it's not needed structurally. It doesn't serve a purpose. It's actually, I guess here's the argument I'd make for it. By having that open, it makes the alley less creepy. I mean, if you really want sight lines, and we are talking about something that services kids, and that you're also going to have a daily engagement there. It just allows for more eyes in that zone without creating kind of that cave, if you will, in that loading area.
Okay. Well, my only issue with it is that it's a view into the whole loading and unloading that's not necessary.
Well, you're right, but the wall I think I've got bigger problems screening it, and it's not a loading dock that is like, let's say, a grocery store or a heavy industrial use. I mean, it's actually programmatically part of what's going on with that school. So it's not a junk area. It's just an access that has the particular function of bringing in stage sets or materials to do that type of work, or catering function if you have an event on level 3.
Anyone else? Motion?
I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead, Weston.
I would, based on the information in the staff report, the information presented and the input received during the public hearing, or lack thereof, I move that the Planning Commission approve PLN SUB 2018-00875 Spy Plan Development with the conditions listed in the staff report. I would just, is as written, does it require the moving of that, or can they do the bike lane instead? Do we need to be specific with that? Okay. Okay, great. Then I'll leave it at that.
A second?
I'll second.
Carolyn? Okay. Sarah?
Yes.
Weston?
Good luck. Great project. Excited for it. Yes.
Adrian?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes, it's a great project.
Carolyn?
I agree. I like the project as a background in education. Thank you for serving our youth. It's very important.
And Amy?
Yeah, I'm rarely excited things that come before us, and I'm really excited about this one. And I actually like how it looks, and I rarely like how anything looks. So you've really hit like 3 home runs, because I'm super thrilled that this surface parking lot is going to be going away. So it's an emphatic yes for me.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
It passes unanimously. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yes. You'll have to go find something else. Okay, we'll move on to the Alliance House zoning map amendment. Take it away, David.
Okay, so this is a zoning map amendment, requested zone change at a property at 1805 South Main Street. It's approximately 11,900 square feet in size, or a little bit more than 1/4 of an acre. The property is currently zoned BP, or Business Park, and the requested change is to Commercial Corridor, or CC zoning. Property contains an existing motel building that is being used for multifamily housing, so that's a non-conforming use. And they want to rebuild on the property some kind of multifamily building. And so they have to change the zone to one that allows residential uses, which aren't allowed currently in the BP zone. There is no specific site development plan with this application, and it's just the zone change, not a master plan amendment in conjunction with it as it meets the master plan. So for context, this is the property shown there. It's just to the north. It's on the east side of Main Street, just to the north of the O.C. Tanner property. A lot of that area is zone BP, which is essentially a much more industrial zone. And then along Main Street and Coatesville, you're getting into more CC zoning. And this is also in the South State Street Overlay Corridor District. There's the existing motel on the site. And again, it's a 9-unit motel, and predated it existed before this area became Zone BP. Another view of it. As I mentioned, here's the zoning map and location context. It is Zone BP. Just to the north of it, the zoning changes to CC, the corridor commercial, which is what they're asking for. And both sides of Main, that is the predominant zoning, as well as over on State Street. There is some RMF 45 across the street from that project that or that property that has the Argyle, which is a multifamily development. So, number of things we looked at: zoning district comparison, BP versus CC. Again, I mentioned that the existing motel is not a allowed use in the residential uses aren't allowed in BP. So they would have to change that to accommodate that multifamily use they're looking for. Another thing to point out is that the CC zone is much less intense in scale and uses than the BP zone. Since this is in the State Street corridor overlay, a BP property in that zoning can actually be built up to a 90-foot level, whereas the zoning they're asking for would allow only 30 feet by right, and it would have to go through a conditional building site design, so a design review process to add up to 15 feet, so 45 feet would be the maximum height. Staff looked at the nature of the general area, the fact that the property is located along a major corridor, a fairly busy street, and that it's supported by the Central City Master Plan and other city plans. The future zoning map in the Central City Master Plan calls for this area to be community commercial. Also, again, the provisions of Plan Salt Lake and Growing Salt Lake, our housing plan, does recognize the need for additional housing. So it is supported by those master plans, and the use does not seem like it would be incompatible with the adjacent properties. So staff's recommending the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to City Council for the zoning map amendment.
Questions for David? Is your applicant here?
Yes.
We'll let you step back and let her come up. Be sure to state your name for the record, and you get 10 minutes.
Okay, I am Paige Huff, and I'm the Executive Director of Alliance House. So 1805 is a property that we've had since the early 90s. It was purchased for our members. We are a nonprofit that serves people with mental illness, and we own 2 different housing properties along with the Alliance House property. So Alliance House is located on 1724 South Main, and then our transitional housing is 1726 South Main, and then we have the 1805 South Main. Both of the 1700 main locations are CC currently, and so changing 1805 over to that would bring us all into accordance to have the same zoning for all of our properties. With us being a nonprofit, we're going to have to kind of figure out exactly how we're going to rebuild and what we're going to do with a commercial campaign, but as of right now, we're not able to do any structural changes to the property as it stands. And we do have members that are currently living there. We have 9 members that live within these properties, and it's just not sustainable as it stands. So.
Any questions for the applicant?
So, notwithstanding funding, when you rebuild, do you feel like you would want to add units, add some height, go up to your 30, possibly higher feet?
Everything that we've looked at as far as talking to architectures would be no more than doubling. So right now we have 9, so we would want to go to 18.
Okay, because I would really, I was looking at the RMF 45 because I felt like this is a good site for some height. That's not, 45 feet is, not extraordinary, but that you take advantage of that to build up, to provide more units. And so that's good to know that you can still go up to 45 feet with a conditional site review plan. But yeah, I was really hoping you think about that?
Yeah, we definitely want to increase, obviously, because the housing shortage is so prevalent. And then with our members and their income levels, there's just not affordable housing. We do have issues with parking, which is going to impact how high or how many units we're able to build based off of the size of our lot, but it's definitely something we're considering.
Thanks.
Any more questions? Thank you. We'll let you step back.
Thank you.
And I will open the public hearing on this. Anyone from the community council? Anybody want to speak on this? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing and bring this back up to staff and the commission.
Okay, and this was sent out to, it's in an area that overlapped two community councils. It was in the Liberty Wells Community Council area and within so many feet of the Ballpark Community Council area. So we did send to both organizations, and neither one of them provided formal comments.
So I have a question for, does this corridor commercial require any minimum lot size, or for its, I mean, this is a very, very small lot. So that's my concern is, can you actually do anything with a lot that small? Is there minimum lot, dimensions for a residential?
There's a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet and a minimum lot width of 75 feet.
Okay, and this one is minimum lot size again of 10,000?
Yes.
Okay, but this is, that, Matt, I can't remember what the lot size, I know.
It was about 12,000, a little under 12.
Okay, okay. That's all my only question.
Okay, any discussion? A motion?
I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you, Adrian.
Based on the findings and analysis in the staff report, testimony, and discussion at the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council approve the proposed zoning map amendment file PLNPCM 2018-00904 for the property located at 1805 South Main Street, proposed zone change from the BP Business Park zoning district to the CC Commercial Corridor zoning district.
I'll second.
Seconds everywhere.
It's my turn.
It's Matt.
I haven't done any today.
Neither have I.
Okay, kids. Oh my gosh.
Everybody gets a turn.
Matt.
Yes.
Sarah.
Yes.
Weston.
Yes.
Adrian.
Yes.
Brenda.
Yes.
Carolyn.
Agree.
And Amy.
Yes.
It passes. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
And with that, the meeting is adjourned.